She was 6 months pregnant when she found divorce papers hidden in her husband's briefcase. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part? Those papers revealed her husband had been tracking her for months before they even met. Her entire marriage was a trap. And then came the slap. Right there, in the middle of a crowded Manhattan restaurant. Dozens of witnesses, her cheek burning, her world shattering. But here's where this story takes a turn no one saw coming. The waiter who helped her that night? He wasn't just a waiter, he was a billionaire CEO, and he had been searching for her for 25 years because he was her brother. And their family? Connected to a convicted murderer, hidden fortunes, and a criminal network that had been watching her since childhood. This is the story of Sarah Mitchell, a woman who discovered her entire life was built on lies. And instead of breaking, she chose to fight back. What you're about to hear isn't just entertainment. It's a masterclass in recognizing manipulation, finding your voice, and understanding that sometimes the worst betrayal opens the door to your greatest transformation. Stay with me until the end, because the way she turns the tables will change how you see your own power. This story carries a powerful message for anyone who has ever felt trapped, controlled, or silenced. Your worth is not defined by the people who try to diminish it. And the truth, no matter how painful, is always the first step toward freedom. She watched her husband, Richard, slice his steak, completely calm. "Keep your voice down, Sarah," he whispered, without even looking at her. "People are staring." "These are divorce papers, Richard," she said, her Alabama accent getting stronger, a sure sign she was upset. "I found them in your briefcase, along with this private investigator's report about me." Richard's gray eyes, cold as steel, finally met hers. "Those are just a precaution. Standard legal protection." Sarah felt her face get hot. "A precaution? It says you have been following me for months. And I know about Jennifer." At the mention of his assistant, Richard's jaw tightened. He placed his silverware down with a deliberate, chilling quiet. "Jennifer is a colleague. You are being dramatic." "I am not dramatic," Sarah shot back. "I saw the credit card bills and the hotel charges. I am not the naive girl you married." She pushed a single page across the table, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I want to know why you really married me, and I want to know what this is." It was a page from the report detailing her mother's family history, information he had no reason to know. Richard's face went pale, his corporate mask completely gone for a second. "Where did you get this?" he demanded. "From your briefcase, with everything else." A strange sense of calm washed over Sarah. It was the same focus she felt before a big test back when she was a teacher. "I want the truth, Richard. All of it." The silence between them was tense. A waiter tried to approach, but Richard waved him away angrily. "The truth?" Richard's voice was dangerously low. "The truth is, you are an ungrateful woman. Without me, you would still be a third-grade teacher in some small town." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You want to talk about honesty? You were a project, Sarah, an investment." His words felt like a punch to the gut. The baby kicked, as if reacting to her fear. "An investment? What does that mean?" He leaned back, his cold smile returning. "It means I know exactly what you are worth, and it has nothing to do with your southern charm." For the first time, she saw the real man she had married. Not a successful lawyer, but a cold-hearted predator who talked about her like she was a stock certificate. "This is about money," she said softly. "Everything is about money, Sarah, something you have never had to worry about. Are you threatening me?" He smirked. "I am explaining your reality. You sign the papers and take the settlement I am offering. You fight me, and I will prove you are an unstable mother." Pregnancy hormones, paranoid accusations. It will not look good. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. This was not just a divorce. This was a war for her child, a way to control her completely. "You can't do this." "I can," he said, "and I will do whatever it takes to protect my interests." Sarah's mind raced, searching for the missing piece. "The investigator's report," she said suddenly. "It mentions my mother's maiden name. Why would you care about that?" For a split second, Richard's confidence wavered. "Standard background check." "We dated for 2 years," she countered. "You knew my history. Why investigate my mother's family, who I barely knew?" When she spoke the name, the air changed. "Why do you care about the name Blackstone?" Richard froze. For the first time ever, she saw fear in his eyes. He grabbed her wrist, his grip like iron. "Listen to me. There are things about your family that are better left buried." "You will sign those papers and disappear," he hissed. She tried to pull away. "You are hurting me. I'm trying to protect you from things that will destroy you." Her anger finally boiled over. All the years of feeling small and dismissed erupted in a single moment of clarity. "Let go of me, Richard," she said, her voice clear and strong. "My family concerns me, and my family is not you." "I am not your property," she declared, her voice ringing through the restaurant. The slap was so fast she never saw it coming. The sound echoed like a gunshot, and the entire dining room went silent. Sarah's cheek burned. She tasted blood. The silence was broken by whispers as dozens of strangers stared. Her life had just shattered in the most public way imaginable. "Ma'am, are you all right?" A waiter was standing beside her. He was tall, with dark hair and kind green eyes that looked strangely familiar. "I am fine," she whispered, though it was a lie. The waiter looked at Richard with pure disgust. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. This is a private matter," Richard snapped, but his voice had lost its power. "Not anymore," the waiter said calmly. "Security is on the way." Richard saw all the eyes on him, his perfect image destroyed. "This is not over, Sarah," he snarled as he stood up, throwing his napkin on the table. He stormed out, leaving Sarah alone in a room full of staring faces. The waiter returned. "Can I get you some ice for that?" he asked gently. As he walked away, Sarah noticed his confident, careful stride. It was the walk of a man who knew how to handle trouble. He slid into Richard's empty seat without an invitation. "I know this is forward," he said, "but you should not be alone right now, and you definitely should not drive." "I will call a car," Sarah said, gratefully taking the ice pack he offered. "What is your name?" "Sarah Mitchell," she answered, then hesitated. "Well, Sarah Wheeler Mitchell, I guess. I am not really sure what my name is anymore." A strange look crossed the waiter's face when he heard the name Wheeler. "Wheeler," he said slowly. "From Alabama?" Sarah stared at him. "How did you know that?" "Your accent," he began, studying her in a way that made her skin crawl. "This might sound crazy, but did you ever live in a town called Fairfield?" Sarah felt a genuine chill run down her spine. "Who are you?" Instead of answering, he reached into his jacket and handed her a business card. Sarah's world spun as she read the words. Blackstone Holdings, Marcus Blackstone, Chief Executive Officer. The name was like a physical blow. Blackstone. It was the same name from Richard's investigation file, the name that had made her husband turn pale with fear. "I do not understand," Sarah whispered. Marcus Blackstone looked at her with those strangely familiar green eyes. His voice was soft but firm. "I think you do, Sarah. I think you have always felt like something was missing, like a part of you was lost somewhere else." Sarah just stared at the man who claimed to be a billionaire, chief executive officer, but had been serving her dinner. He knew her hometown. He knew her maiden name. He looked at her as if he had spent his entire life searching for her. "Who are you?" she asked again. "I am your brother," Marcus said plainly, "and I have been looking for you for 25 years. 3 hours later, Sarah was in her silent penthouse, staring at the card that had shattered her reality. The ice pack was now a puddle of water, but the impossible claim from the man who said he was her brother was not fading at all. Marcus Blackstone. The name played over in her mind. As soon as she got home, she had searched for him online. The results made her collapse into Richard's expensive leather chair. Forbes magazine listed Marcus Blackstone as the 38th richest person in America, with a net worth of $4.2 billion. He had built a tech empire from absolutely nothing. The photo showed a man with her green eyes and their mother's determined jawline. But what truly struck her was his expression. In every picture, he looked guarded, yet hopeful. He looked like a man who had everything, but was still searching for one specific thing. Her laptop was open to an interview from 2019. In it, he talked about growing up in foster care in Alabama after his mother vanished when he was 13. He spoke about overcoming abandonment and channeling that pain into his work. He said, "I learned that the people who are supposed to love you can disappear. But I also learned that love is not just about blood. It is about choosing to be there for people." Sarah remembered being 17 when her mother died in a car crash. Her stepfather, Tom, had called it a sudden, tragic accident. 6 months later, they moved to New York. Tom had legally changed her name from Sarah Blackstone Wheeler to Sarah Wheeler. He said it was a fresh start. Now she wondered if he had other reasons. The apartment felt like a stranger's house. The minimalist furniture and abstract art Richard had picked out all felt like a costume she was finally ready to take off. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from Richard. "We need to talk. This does not have to be difficult." She deleted the message without a reply. Then she dialed the number on Marcus Blackstone's card. He answered on the very first ring. "Sarah? I need to ask you something," she said, skipping any greeting. "Do you remember a little girl who used to read under a big oak tree behind a blue house on Maple Street?" There was a long silence. When Marcus finally spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. "You had a book about a princess who saved herself. You read it so many times the cover fell off." Sarah closed her eyes, the memory rushing back. She was 7 or 8 years old. An older boy would sometimes bring her lemonade and sit nearby while she read. Her mother used to call him her guardian angel. "That was you," she whispered. "That was me," he confirmed. "I was 15, working at the grocery store. I always checked on you on my way home. Mom said you were too little to understand why I could not live with you." "And Dad?" she asked. "You are my brother." "Half-brother," Marcus corrected gently. "We have the same mother, but different fathers. Mine was a violent man. Mom got us both away from him, but your father could give you a stable life that she could not give me." Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes. "Why did no one ever tell me?" "Because Mom made everyone promise to protect you," he explained. "She was terrified my father would find us and use you to hurt her. When she died, your stepfather kept that promise. Tom Wheeler is a good man, Sarah. He moved you across the country and changed your name because he was truly afraid for you. My father was in and out of prison my entire childhood. Mom never wanted you to grow up with that darkness." Sarah thought about Tom, who had always been kind but so distant. She had always thought it was grief. Now she knew it was guilt. "Where is your father now?" "Our father," Marcus corrected again. "He is serving life in prison without parole for murder. He has been there for 8 years. The words were like ice, Witupus. "Murder?" "He killed a man who threatened me," Marcus said. "Ironic, since he was the biggest threat in my own life. But that is a story for another time. The important thing is, he cannot hurt you." He cannot hurt either of us. Sarah tried to absorb it all. Her half-brother was a billionaire. Her biological father was a convicted murderer. And she had learned both of these facts on the same night her husband had hit her and threatened to take her baby. "This is insane," she said out loud. "This morning, I was just a wife dealing with postpartum depression. Tonight I find out my husband is divorcing me because of a family I never knew I had, and my long-lost brother is one of the richest men in America." "Life reveals its truths all at once sometimes," Marcus said calmly. "The question is what you do with them." Sarah looked around the cold apartment that had never felt like a home. She thought about the divorce papers, the threats, and the bruises on her wrist. "I want to understand what is happening to me. That will require some difficult conversations," he warned. "More difficult than learning my entire life is a lie?" Marcus gave a dry laugh. "You would be surprised. Can you meet me tomorrow morning? My office at 10. What if Richard finds out?" "Sarah, if I cannot protect one pregnant woman from one bully of an attorney, then I am not the businessman everyone thinks I am." For the first time in a very long time, Sarah felt like someone was truly on her side. "Okay," she said, "but I have conditions." "Name them." "I want the whole truth about Mom, about your father, about why Richard is so terrified of the Blackstone name. Everything. No more lies to protect me." "Agreed," he said. "And I need to know what this means for my baby. My child will not be a pawn in Richard's game." "Sarah," Marcus said, his voice firm but kind, "I give you my word. Your child will grow up safe, loved, and free from the shadows of our parents. Family protects family." After they hung up, Sarah sat in the dark. The woman she was this morning felt like a completely different person. She made some tea and opened her laptop one more time. This time, she searched for a connection between Mitchell Industries and Blackstone Holdings. What she found made her feel sick. For the last 3 years, there had been a pattern of legal attacks against Blackstone companies. All of them were filed by law firms connected to Richard's firm, Mitchell Holbrook and Associates. They were not designed to win. They were designed to drain money and create bad press. It was a systematic war, and she had been married to the enemy. Sarah finally understood. Her husband, Richard, had not just known about Marcus. He had been secretly working against him for years. All those late nights and sudden business trips were not about building their future. He was actively destroying her brothers. The baby kicked, and Sarah rested a hand on her stomach. "Don't you worry," she whispered, a sense of real promise replacing months of hollow hope. The next morning, a gray rain soaked Manhattan. Sarah stood on Fifth Avenue, looking up at the Blackstone building. Its 91 stories of glass and steel disappeared into the clouds. The lobby was grand and intimidating, but when she gave her name, the guard's demeanor changed instantly. He went from professionally polite to genuinely warm. "Miss Mitchell, Mr. Blackstone is expecting you. He asked me to bring you up myself." The elevator ride to the 91st floor felt like an eternity, giving Sarah a moment to steady herself. She had spent the night researching Marcus Blackstone. He was a brilliant and ruthless businessman. But between the lines of his interviews, she sensed a profound loneliness. He often talked about second chances, about helping people overcome their circumstances. Sarah suspected he spent 15 years trying to save everyone else because he could not save himself from the pain of losing his own family. The doors opened us to a reception area that felt like a cozy library, not a corporate headquarters. A woman in her 50s stood up from a beautiful antique desk. "Miss Mitchell, I am Helen, Mr. Blackstone's assistant. He is ready for you." Marcus's office occupied the entire corner of the building. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of Central Park. But the room felt personal, not staged. There were family photos, comfortable furniture, and a well-used leather reading chair. Marcus stood facing the window. When he turned, Sarah was once again struck by how much he looked like their mother. "Thank you for coming," he said. "Thank you for telling me the truth," she replied. "Or at least some of it." He pointed toward two chairs arranged to face the spectacular view. Between them was a folder she knew held the rest of her life story. "Coffee? Tea?" he offered. "Actually, I want to start with this," Sarah said. She pulled a photograph from her purse. It showed a young woman holding a toddler with a little boy standing beside them. "This is the only picture I have of our mother with both of us." Marcus took it, his hands not quite steady. "I remember this day. Mom had just bought you that dress with the pink flowers. You wore it for a month straight." "I do not remember the dress," Sarah said, "but I remember feeling safe." She sat down, placing her hands on her stomach. "Tell me everything that happened." Marcus paused, his fingers tracing the edge of the old photo. "Our father, Victor Blackstone, was a violent alcoholic. He could never keep a job. Mom wanted to leave him, but she believed marriage was forever. By the time I was 10, she was finally planning our escape." "Both of us?" Sarah asked. "Yes, that was the plan. She was saving money and figuring out how to disappear with us. But Victor found out." Sarah's heart tightened. "What did he do?" "He beat me so badly I was in the hospital for a week. He told Mom that if she ever tried to leave with his children, he would find and kill all three of us. To Victor, we were not children to love. We were property to control." Sarah thought of Richard's cold threats about custody. The methods were different, but the mindset was the same. "So she chose to save one of us instead of losing both," Sarah said softly. "She took you and ran, promising to come back for me." "But it was never safe," Marcus said, shaking his head. "Victor spent 2 years hunting for you. Mom lived in constant fear." "What changed?" "I did," Marcus said, his voice flat. "When I turned 13, I was finally big enough and angry enough to fight back. One night, Victor came home drunk and started on me. This time, I hit him back. I broke his jaw and 3 of his ribs." Sarah stared. "You were 13. I was old enough to be done with being afraid. After that, he left me alone, but he became obsessed with finding you." He wanted to punish Mom for taking his property, Sarah realized. "Did he find you?" "No, but he found your stepfather, Tom Wheeler. Tom called Mom in a panic. Someone had been asking questions about you at your school." A chill ran down Sarah's spine. What did she do? She made another impossible choice. She called Tom and told him to disappear with you. Change your name, move across the country, and cut all ties. She knew Victor would use you to hurt her, and then he would get rid of all of you. Tom truly loved you. He adopted you legally and gave you a life where Victor Blackstone could never find you. "And what about you and Mom?" Sarah asked, her voice thick with tears. "We agreed I would go into foster care. Mom would stay hidden until Victor gave up his search. But that day never came. Victor was in and out of prison for the next few years, always making threats, always promising he would find you." Sarah held her breath. "And then?" "And then Mom died in a car accident when you were 17, Marcus said. But the way he said it made Sarah look at him closely. "You do not believe it was an accident, do you?" "I think Mom was exhausted from 5 years of hiding. I think she was driving too fast in bad weather because someone tricked her, promising information about Victor. I cannot prove it, but I have never been able to shake the feeling that her accident was just too convenient. The timing was too perfect." A cold dread washed over Sarah. "You believe our father had her killed?" Marcus's voice was low. "It's possible. Victor never admitted it, but he was never surprised she died just as she planned to reunite with us." The baby inside Sarah kicked sharply, making her gasp. Marcus was instantly concerned. "Are you all right?" She struggled for breath. "I'm just processing that my mother might have been murdered by the same man who hunted me for years." Marcus gently took her hand. "Listen to me, Sarah. Victor cannot hurt you anymore. He is in prison for life, with no outside contact. He has no idea where you are. You are finally safe." "But Richard knows who I am," she whispered. "He knows the Blackstone name. And that brings us to the question that has haunted me for 3 years. How does your husband know secrets about our family?" "It took me a decade and a fortune to find those answers," Marcus continued. Sarah's mind raced, thinking of the investigator's report and Richard's chilling confidence. "My marriage was never about love," she said, the words tasting like poison. "It was about getting access to something." Marcus opened a folder and slid a document across the table. Sarah's blood ran cold. "Blackstone Holdings has a unique structure," he explained. "I created a rule that allows any direct blood relative to claim a huge stake in the company if they meet certain conditions." "What kind of conditions?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. "Marriage, children, proof of a genetic link. It was designed to protect my future family, to make sure money could never tear us apart the way poverty did." Sarah stared at the paper as a horrible truth began to dawn on her. "Richard married me to get your money through our child," she realized aloud. "I think someone told him that marrying a Blackstone heir would lead to an unimaginable payday," Marcus corrected gently. "The real question is, who gave him that information?" Sarah thought of her life with Richard, the financial generosity paired with suffocating control. He had always managed their legal and money matters. "He was playing a long game," she murmured. "He invested years in a relationship he thought would make him incredibly wealthy." If Sarah had claimed her inheritance and then divorced him, property laws would have handed him hundreds of millions of dollars. The sheer scale of his deception felt like a physical blow. She had loved a man who only saw her as a key to a vault she never knew existed. "But what if he divorced me first?" she asked, "before I knew about you?" "Then he could claim you hid assets during the marriage," Marcus said. "He could argue for a massive settlement based on fraud. It was actually a very clever plan." A hot surge of anger coursed through Sarah. "He was going to steal my inheritance and use my child against me and expect me to thank him for the leftovers." "That seems to have been the plan, until you found those papers," Marcus confirmed. "So what do we do now?" For the first time, a dangerous glint appeared in her brother's eyes. "Now we find out who has been feeding Richard information. Then we make sure anyone who tries to use our family for personal gain learns why that is a terrible mistake." Looking at him, Sarah no longer saw just a businessman, but the 13-year-old boy who refused to be broken. "I want to help," she declared. "Sarah, you are 6 months pregnant and in the middle of a divorce. You need to rest." "This is my life they have been manipulating," she insisted. "It is my child they plan to use as a pawn. I will not sit on the sidelines while men decide my future." Marcus studied her face, and a flicker of recognition softened his expression. "You have Mom's eyes," he said softly, "and her courage, too. Okay, we do this together, but we do it smart, and we do it safe. What is the first step?" "First, we move you somewhere Richard cannot find you. I have a place that is completely secure and private." "I cannot just vanish," she protested. "I have appointments and responsibilities." "All of which we can manage with much better security," Marcus said, leaning forward. "Sarah, I spent 25 years wondering what happened to you. I am not losing you again." Thinking of Richard's threats, she finally nodded. "Okay, but no more secrets. I want to know everything we are up against." "Agreed," Marcus said. "But first, I want you to meet the person who helped me search for you all these years. She has some theories about how Richard got his information." "Who is it?" A private investigator named Detective Maria Santos. She specializes in corporate spying and family reunification, and she believes your husband's connection to our family goes back much further than we imagined. As if on cue, the office door opened. A woman in her 40s walked in, carrying a thick file. The look on her face said she was about to deliver bad news. "Miss Mitchell," she said with a nod, "we need to talk." Detective Maria Santos had an intense presence that seemed to pull the truth from people. She was compact and efficient, with graying hair in a no-nonsense ponytail and eyes that saw everything. She sat down and opened her file. "Before we begin," she said to Sarah, "you need to know that what I am about to share will change how you see everyone in your life. Are you ready for that?" Sarah glanced at her brother. "I do not think I have a choice. There is always a choice," Maria countered. "You could walk away, take Marcus's offer, and build a quiet life. Many would call that the smart move. Would you?" Sarah asked. A slight smile touched Maria's lips. "I have never been accused of being smart, but I am very thorough." She pulled a photograph from the file and placed it on the table. "Do you recognize this man?" When Sarah saw the picture, her world tilted. "That's my stepfather, Tom Wheeler. This was taken 3 weeks ago outside Richard's building." The implication was like a splash of ice water. "Tom has been feeding Richard information about our family for over 2 years," Maria explained. Sarah stared at the photo of the man who raised her, unable to process the betrayal. "That's impossible. He protected me from all of this. He built a new life for me." "He did," Maria agreed. "And he's been terrified ever since that he made the wrong choice." Marcus leaned in. "Tom feels guilty about your mother's death. He blames himself for not protecting her, for taking you so far away that she died alone." "He never said anything," Sarah whispered. "What could he say?" Maria asked gently. "That he's questioned himself for decades, wondering if your mother would still be alive if he'd acted differently." Maria produced another document. 2 years ago, someone approached Tom claiming to work for Richard. They said they had found Marcus and wanted to arrange a family reunion safely. Marcus's face darkened. "And Tom believed them?" "He wanted to believe them," Maria said. "He'd been following your success, hoping for a way to reconnect you and your sister. He thought this was his chance to finally make things right." "So he told them everything," Sarah said, feeling sick. "Your new name, your location, your husband's career. He thought he was helping to heal our family. Instead, he gave Richard the weapon to destroy it," Marcus said grimly. "It gets worse," Maria continued. "They kept coming back, asking about your mother's final days, Victor Blackstone's threats, and the specific details of her death. Why would they care about that?" Maria looked at Marcus, then back at Sarah. "Because Victor Blackstone is still dangerous, even in prison. He runs a criminal network from his cell, and his sons from his first marriage are very interested in making sure no one else can claim their inheritance." The baby kicked again as Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. "His sons?" "Victor had 2 sons before he met your mother," Maria said. "Professional criminals who have been waiting 25 years for him to die. So they could inherit whatever hidden assets he had," Sarah guessed. "What assets?" Maria pulled out another paper. "Victor Blackstone was a monster, but he was smart. He hid a fortune from his criminal enterprises that the FBI never found." Marcus sat perfectly still. "How much?" "Estimates range from $10 to $50 million, Maria said. "Enough to make people eliminate any competition." Sarah struggled to breathe. "Competition like me. Like you and any children you have," Maria confirmed. "Under Alabama law, all of Victor's biological children have a claim. Richard wasn't just after Marcus's fortune, he wanted our baby to claim Victor's hidden money too." "Exactly," Maria confirmed. marry into the family, get Marcus's clean money, and eventually claim Victor's dirty money through his child. Sarah looked at Marcus, seeing her own horror reflected in his eyes. How many people are involved? At least Victor's 2 sons, their outside contacts, Richard's crew, and probably some very dangerous people Victor owed money to, Maria listed. The scale of it was suffocating. Sarah thought she was escaping a cheating husband, but she had walked into a criminal conspiracy spanning generations. What about Tom? She asked quietly. He is filled with regret and is absolutely terrified, Maria said. He tried to back out, but it was too late. They have enough on him to ruin his life. We have to help him, Sarah insisted. We will, Marcus said firmly. But first, we have to keep you safe. If Victor's sons find out Richard's plan is failing, they'll look for more direct solutions. A look passed between Marcus and Maria, and Sarah knew there was more. Show her the timeline, Marcus said. Maria reluctantly slid a final document to her. It cross-referenced family events with other coincidences. I don't understand, Sarah said. Your mother's car accident was 2 days after Victor's last appeal was denied, Maria pointed out. Richard met you 6 months after Marcus's company went public, and his people approached your stepfather a week after Victor's sons got out of prison. You think this was all planned for years? Sarah asked, stunned. I think it's been planned since your mother died, Marcus said grimly. Victor's sons have been watching us for decades, waiting for the right moment to take what they believe is theirs. Or Richard has been working for them from the start, Maria added. Sarah felt crushed by the weight of the lies. So, everyone in my life has been lying to me? Not everyone, Marcus said gently. Tom made mistakes, but he loves you, and now you have family who will do anything to keep you safe. What does that mean? Maria leaned forward. It means you disappear, new name, secure location, 24-hour protection until the baby is born, and we've neutralized the threats. How long could that take? Sarah asked. Months, maybe longer. The thought of hiding for the rest of her pregnancy was both a relief and a prison. What if I do not want to disappear? What if I want to fight? Then you put yourself and the baby at risk, Marcus said bluntly. These people have already killed once, Sarah. They will do it again. You really think they killed my mother? Her accident was incredibly convenient for them, he replied. Sarah put a hand on her stomach. This was not just about her anymore. An innocent child deserved to grow up safe, free from the violence that had haunted their family. Okay, she said, finally, I will disappear. But I want updates, and I want a say in how this ends. I refuse to spend my life looking over my shoulder. What are you suggesting? Marcus asked. I'm suggesting it's time the Blackstones stopped running from Victor's legacy and started fighting back. A fierce smile spread across Marcus's face. Now you're talking like a Blackstone. The safe house was a massive estate in the Hamptons, complete with a private beach and a full staff. It was paradise. But after 3 weeks, Sarah felt trapped. You're pacing again, Dr. Hartman noted. The obstetrician Marcus hired visited twice a week. I'm pregnant, not a prisoner, Sarah shot back, circling the living room. And I am going insane just sitting around. Your brother is trying to protect you. My brother is trying to control an out-of-control situation, Sarah corrected. Dr. Hartman closed her chart. Tell me about the nightmares. Sarah paused. For weeks she'd had the same dream of her mother's car skidding in a storm, her name being called out just before the crash. They're just stress dreams. Trauma can show itself in many ways, especially during pregnancy, the doctor said calmly. You think I'm having a breakdown? I think you're having a normal reaction to finding out your life is a lie, Dr. Hartman replied. The real question is, will you let that trauma define you, or will you take control of your own story? Sarah sank into a chair, finally admitting her exhaustion. How can I take control when I do not even understand what I'm fighting? Then maybe it is time to stop fighting their battles and start fighting for what you want, the doctor suggested. If you could write the ending to this story, Sarah, what would it look like? For weeks, a single question had haunted Sarah. What did she want? For so long, her life had been a reaction to other people's choices and secrets. I want my child to grow up free, she said with sudden clarity. Free from the violence that defined our family, free from people who see children as bargaining chips, free from the kind of fear that forced our mother into hiding. That is a good start, Marcus said gently. What else? I want the whole truth about my mother's death, about Victor, about who has been pulling the strings in my life. I am done being a character in a story I do not understand. And what do you want for yourself, Sarah? Not as a mother or a sister, just for you. The question surprised her. She had not thought about her own needs in years. I want to matter, she said softly. For 6 long years, I was married to a man who only saw me as a tool for his own success. I just want to be valued for who I am, not for what I can give him. Do you think that is even possible in my life right now? Sarah glanced around the beautiful cage Marcus had built for her. She thought about the guards outside and the cameras watching every move. Not if I stay hidden forever, she thought. Not if I let other people decide my future. Dr. Hartman nodded. So, what does taking control actually look like for you? I have no idea. I do not have the money or the know-how to fight people like Victor's sons by myself. But you have a brother with those resources, the doctor reminded her. The real question is, do you want to be his partner in this fight? Or just watch from the sidelines? Before Sarah could reply, her phone buzzed. It was Marcus. She expected his daily call, but his voice was tight with worry. Sarah, we must talk. Can Dr. Hartman listen in? Of course, what happened? Maria found new information on Richard. We know why he has been acting so confident about the divorce. Sarah switched the call to speaker. Tell me. Richard is building a case to have you declared mentally unfit. He is documenting your so-called emotional instability and paranoid behavior. He plans to argue that the stress of the pregnancy and finding out about me has caused a psychological break. He wants a judge to believe you are incapable of making decisions for yourself or your child. The words felt like a punch to the gut. He cannot do that. He can if he has enough evidence. And according to Maria, he has been carefully manufacturing it. Dr. Hartman leaned in closer. What kind of evidence? Medical records showing your anxiety during the pregnancy. He is using your accusations about his affair as proof of paranoid jealousy. He even has statements from witnesses about your emotional outbursts, including the incident at the restaurant, Sarah whispered, feeling sick. He is using my reaction to him slapping me as proof that I am the unstable one. It is worse than that. He also plans to argue that your connection to me is a dangerous influence because of my family's criminal history. He wants to paint you as someone with poor judgment who would endanger a child. This is completely insane. It is actually very smart, Dr. Hartman said grimly. Mental health struggles during pregnancy are a real and documented issue. If he convinces a judge that you have severe depression, he could get full custody and control of all your money. Sarah started to tremble. How much time do we have? Richard filed the initial papers yesterday. You have 30 days to respond before he can demand an emergency hearing. Can we fight this? We can, Marcus said. But you will have to be seen. You have to be active in your own defense. No more hiding. You can no longer let other people manage your legal fight. You will need to prove to professionals, and maybe a judge, that you are competent and stable. Sarah thought about the safe house. The luxury and isolation had felt like protection, but now it looked like she was running away from her life. Marcus, I have to come back to the city. Absolutely not, he shot back. It is too dangerous. It is more dangerous for me to look like I am hiding from my life. If Richard is arguing that I am unstable, then disappearing for weeks and avoiding my responsibilities only helps his case. Dr. Hartman agreed. Sarah is right. Long-term isolation can make mental health issues worse. To fight this, she must show that she is engaged with her life and making smart decisions. The threats against her are real, Marcus insisted. Then we will handle the threats while I live my life, not by putting my life on pause, Sarah countered. Sarah, you do not get how dangerous these men are, and you do not get how dangerous it is for a woman to let other people make all her decisions. Even people who love her. The line went silent. When Marcus spoke again, his tone had shifted from argumentative to curious. What are you thinking? I am thinking we should stop defending and start attacking. Richard wants to use my family history against me. What if we use it to my advantage instead? How? We take control of the story. Instead of hiding from the Blackstone name, what if we embrace it? What if we use it to expose everyone who has been trying to use us? Dr. Hartman looked impressed. Keep going. Marcus, you built an empire over 15 years on the idea that anyone can rise above their past. I spent my whole life not even knowing I had a past to rise above. What if we tell that story to the world? You want to go public with everything? I want to strip Richard of his power to define me. Instead of letting him call me an unstable woman, I will tell the story of a woman who found her brother and chose to fight for her family. Marcus was quiet for a long time. That is a huge risk, Sarah. Once that story is out, you can never take it back. Once Richard files his case, there is no taking it back either. At least this way, I tell my own story. What about the threats? Victor's sons and the others? What about them? They have operated in the shadows for 25 years, using secrecy and fear. What happens to their power when a spotlight is shining on them? When the entire world is watching the Blackstone family? Dr. Hartman smiled. That does not sound like an unstable woman talking. That sounds like someone who knows exactly what she is facing and has a strategy to win. Marcus, I need to come home. I need to be in this fight, not hiding from it. The phone was quiet for so long Sarah thought he had hung up. When Marcus finally answered, his voice was filled with something she had never heard before. Pride. Okay, sister. Let us go to war. Returning to Manhattan was like entering a new reality, one where her name finally meant something. The apartment she once shared with Richard was now what Marcus called a fortress with good lighting. It had reinforced doors, new surveillance systems, and panic rooms hidden inside walk-in closets. This seems like a bit much, Sarah commented. It is necessary, Marcus said, looking at a security feed. Maria's sources say Victor's sons are getting tired of Richard's slow tactics. They want to take more direct action, meaning they would rather just get rid of the competition. Sarah put a hand on her stomach. At 7.5 months pregnant, she felt the baby move, a comforting reminder of what she was fighting for. Have you heard from Richard? Every single day. He calls, he texts, he sends flowers. He is playing the part of the worried husband whose pregnant wife is being led astray. And his legal case? It is stronger than we hoped, Marcus admitted. He has statements from your old coworkers who are questioning your judgment. He has medical records about your anxiety, and even statements from neighbors about how your behavior has changed. What kind of changes? Isolating yourself, acting paranoid, abandoning your routines. All things that are easily explained when you learn your husband is divorcing you to steal your inheritance. But Richard's lawyers are framing it as a mental breakdown caused by pregnancy and family trauma. Sarah felt a surge of frustration. How can we fight that? Maria has been digging into Richard's finances and his deception. We can prove he planned this divorce for years, that he married you under false pretenses, and that he has been intentionally trying to undermine your mental health. Will it be enough? Honestly, Marcus said, I do not know. In family court, it might just look like a he said, she said situation unless we can prove criminal fraud. Imagine your family history being used as a weapon against you. That was Sarah's reality. Pacing in her apartment, she refined the plan she'd proposed. What if we do not wait for the court? She said to Marcus. What if we tell the public everything, right now? Taking this story public could mean winning her life back, but it could also put her in even greater danger. Marcus pulled up a chair, ready to strategize. Tell me the benefits. She explained her idea. First, it would prove she was clear-headed, not having a breakdown, as her husband Richard claimed. It would force his powerful allies out of the shadows, making them accountable for their actions. And finally, it would help protect other people from facing the same nightmare. Sarah felt a new sense of purpose growing inside her. I want to do it, she declared, but I want to do it the right way. This was about more than just her own battle. It was for every woman trapped by lies and secrets. It was for every family broken by a hidden past. She wanted her struggle to have meaning, to create change for others. If she was going to risk everything for herself and her unborn baby, it had to count for something more than just a custody fight. Just as she finished speaking, her phone buzzed with an unknown number. A strange feeling made her answer it. Hello? A weak voice on the other end said, Sarah, it is Tom. It was her stepfather. His voice sounded thin and old, and a wave of conflicting emotions, love, anger, and deep sadness, washed over her. He was the man who had raised her, but he had also betrayed her. Tom, where are you? She asked. I need to see you, he pleaded. There are things I should have told you years ago, things about your mother's final days, and the real reason I moved you to New York. Sarah felt torn. She loved the man who had been her father for 25 years, but she knew he could be a trap. Tom, she said softly, I need you to know that I forgive you for talking to Richard's people. I understand why you did it. A long silence followed, and she wondered if he was crying. You were always too generous, Sarah, he finally whispered. That is what made you so vulnerable to men like Richard. She felt a chill. What do you mean, men like Richard? He told her the devastating truth. Richard had not met her by accident at that charity event. He was hunting her. A cold dread spread through her chest. Hunting me? How? Tom explained that Richard had been tracking her for months before they ever met. He learned her daily routine, her interests, and all her emotional soft spots, her passion for teaching, her desire to help people. He studied it all like a predator. How do you know this? She asked, her voice trembling. The people who contacted me, Tom said, they showed me photographs of you, pictures of you going to work, to the grocery store, to your book club. They were watching you the entire time. The beautiful romance she thought she had was a lie. It was a carefully planned operation. At that moment, the baby kicked hard, sensing her distress. Tom, listen to me, she said urgently. Go to the nearest police station. Ask for protection. Tell them everything. But it was too late. The line went dead. A terrible feeling washed over her. Marcus was already on the phone, trying to locate Tom, but Sarah's mind was made up. This was the final push she needed. Marcus, she said firmly, how soon can we set up a press conference? He saw the new determination in her eyes. Why? He asked. Because I refuse to spend my life hiding from people who think they can own me, she declared. And I will not let my child grow up in a world where victims are forced to be silent. By Wednesday evening, with the press conference set for the next morning, doubts began to creep in. Was she making a huge mistake, or was she finally taking back her life? Helen, her assistant, confirmed that every major news network would be there. This was going to be a massive story. His panic was so obvious. Richard's lawyers sent a letter asking us to reconsider any public statements. What they really meant was, he knows that once I tell my story, his lies about my mental health will fall apart. Maria Santos walked into the office with a thick folder, and her serious expression made everyone stop what they were doing. "We have a problem," she said. My stomach instantly sank. "What kind of problem?" I asked. "The kind," she replied, "that makes tomorrow's press conference a lot more dangerous." Maria opened the folder and laid photos on Marcus's desk. They showed dark cars parked outside several of our family's buildings. I stared at the pictures of strange men, clearly positioned to watch everyone who came and went. "Surveillance," Marcus said, his voice low. "It is worse than that," Maria added. "3 of these men have criminal records, and they are tied to Victor Blackstone's organization. They are not here to watch. They are here to send a message." I felt the baby kick, a sharp jab of my own anxiety made real. "Are we in immediate danger?" I whispered. "We are talking about people who operate in the shadows," Maria explained. "The thought of national media attention makes them unpredictable." Marcus was already on the phone, speaking quietly but urgently to his security team. I watched my protective older brother transform into the powerful executive who built an empire. When he hung up, he looked at us and said, "Options." Maria spoke first. "We postpone, we move Sarah to the safe house, and wait for law enforcement to handle this. It could take weeks or even months." "No," I protested. "While we wait, Richard moves forward with his case to prove I am incompetent. He could get custody of my baby." "That is better than you getting hurt," Maria insisted. "Is it?" I shot back. "Is it better for my child to be raised by a man who manipulated and abused me? A man who married me under false pretenses just to steal my inheritance?" Marcus and Maria shared a look, and I knew they had already considered this. "There is another option," Marcus said slowly. "We move the press conference to a secure location, and we force their hand. We do not just tell your story about Richard. We tell the whole story about Victor's criminal network and the threats against our family." Suddenly, everything became clear. "We make it impossible for them to hide in the shadows anymore," I said. "Exactly. We put everything on the record, with federal agents present." Maria looked doubtful. "That is incredibly risky. You would be declaring war." "They declared war on us 25 years ago," Marcus answered. "We are just finally fighting back." I thought about my mother, who died alone in a car crash that might not have been an accident. I thought about Tom, forced into hiding for trying to help me. And I thought about the baby inside me, who deserved a legacy of strength, not fear. "I want to do it," I said, "but I need a guarantee that law enforcement will be there and that Tom will have witness protection." "It is already arranged," Marcus confirmed. "Maria has been working with Federal Bureau of Investigation agents who have wanted to take down Victor's organization for years. They are very eager to have witnesses who will cooperate." "What about Richard?" I asked. "Richard becomes a minor detail in a much larger story," Marcus said. "This is no longer a messy divorce. This is about a woman who discovered her family was being targeted by organized crime and chose to fight back." A strange sense of calm washed over me. It was the same feeling I got in the classroom when facing a difficult problem. Sometimes the only way forward is to face the challenge head-on with the truth. "When do we start writing my statement?" I asked. Marcus pulled out a notepad. "We have already started, but the words need to be yours. This is your story to tell." For the next 4 hours, we worked together. I wanted to expose the lies without sounding like a victim, and to acknowledge the danger without sounding paranoid. "The key," Maria said, "is to sound like you are taking control of your own story." As we worked, a thought began to form in my mind. I have been wondering about something, I said to Marcus. Why did Victor's sons wait so long to make a move? They could have tried to get his money years ago. Why target me now? Marcus paused, thinking. What is your theory? He asked. I think they had to be sure Victor was never getting out of prison, I explained. As long as he might be released, they would not dare challenge him. But something must have changed. Maria's eyes widened slightly. His final appeal was denied 6 months ago, permanently. For the first time in 25 years, they know for certain that he will die in prison. Which means, I continued, feeling a cold dread, they can finally plan to take over his empire. But first, they have to eliminate any other potential heirs. You and any children you might have. I placed a hand on my stomach. So Richard was just a convenient way for them to gain control. Stopping him does not stop the real threat. No, Marcus agreed. But exposing the real threat will neutralize Richard. He smiled, and I saw a fierce pride in his eyes. You know what I realized? You have stopped thinking like someone who is being hunted. You have started thinking like someone who is doing the hunting. I knew he was right. Somewhere along the way, I had changed from prey into a predator. Is that a good thing? I asked. It is survival, he said, and it is what will keep you and your baby safe. Later, I stood looking out at the city lights. Marcus, what if this does not work? What if going public just makes us bigger targets? Then we will deal with whatever comes next, he said, but we will do it together, as a family, in the open, not hiding in the shadows. He took my hand. Promise me something, I said. Anything. Promise me that tomorrow we do not let fear make our decisions. I promise, he said firmly, but you have to promise me something too. If this gets too dangerous, you will let me get you and the baby somewhere safe. I saw the same protective instinct in his eyes that must have driven our mother all those years ago. I promise I will always put my baby's safety first, I said, but I will not promise to hide while other people fight my battles. Those days are over. He nodded, accepting my terms. Then let us go make some history. The next morning was gray and cold. I stood in the bathroom, looking at myself in the mirror. At 8 months pregnant, I felt the weight of the world on my shoulders. But as I looked closer, I saw something new in my reflection, a steady and determined woman who was not there 6 months ago. The woman staring back at me was finally ready for the fight model. The conference room at Blackstone Holdings had been turned into a media hub, swarming with cameras and reporters. Marcus turned to her one last time. You do not have to do this, he said gently. We can find another way. Sarah shook her head. No, I am done letting other people control my future. Just then, Maria Santos rushed in, her face serious. We just heard from the Federal Bureau of Investigation, she announced. Victor's sons have made contact. They want to negotiate. Sarah's heart pounded. Negotiate what? Maria explained the offer. They would leave her alone for good. They would stop all surveillance and intimidation. They would not interfere with her divorce or custody battle. In return, she had to publicly give up any claim to her biological father's assets and promise to never investigate her mother's death. Absolutely not, Marcus said instantly, but Sarah held up a hand. It is not his decision. She thought about the deal. It offered safety, but at a terrible price, living with unanswered questions forever. A powerful anger rose inside her. They want me to choose fear and ignorance, she said, her voice shaking. They want me to live like my mother did, and pass that same legacy of silence to my child. Marcus urged her to think carefully, reminding her that the offer meant safety for her and the baby. This offer, she replied, is exactly the kind of thinking that created this mess. Maria then revealed one more critical piece of information. The Federal Bureau of Investigation believed the offer was a sign of weakness. They were more afraid of public exposure than anyone had realized. The threats were real, but so was their fear. Sarah now knew she had more power than she ever imagined. Sarah's voice was firm, leaving no room for argument. I am not taking their deal. I refuse to trade our story for their silence, and I will not teach my child that you give bullies what they want. Marcus started to object, but Sarah cut him off. No, I have listened to everyone and made my choice. We are holding this press conference, and we are telling the absolute truth. Just then, a knock came at the door. It was Helen. Miss Mitchell, your stepfather is here. He is with the FBI and needs to speak with you alone. Sarah glanced at Marcus, who reluctantly agreed. You have 5 minutes. Tom Wheeler looked tired. The stress of the past few weeks etched on his face. But his gentle smile was the same one that had always comforted her. Sarah, sweetheart, he said, hugging her gently around her growing belly. I am safe now, but I had to see you. I have to tell you some things that might change your mind. He handed her a thick manila envelope filled with documents. This is information I should have given you years ago, but I was too afraid. Sarah opened it and saw photos of her mother, Maria Blackstone, as a young woman she had never seen. In the pictures, her mother stood laughing next to a man Sarah did not recognize. Who is this? She asked. That is Detective James Morrison, Tom said. He was the officer investigating Victor's crimes. He was helping your mother plan your escape from Alabama. Sarah looked closer at the photo, at an unfamiliar expression of hope on her mother's face. She looks happy. Tom nodded. She was. But then Detective Morrison was killed in what the police called a robbery. Your mother was certain Victor had him murdered, and she was terrified he would do the same to anyone else who tried to help. Instead, Tom presented a new document, this one on official Alabama State Police letterhead. He explained, This is Detective Morrison's final report on Victor's organization. He was scheduled to present this to a federal grand jury the week he was killed. As Sarah scanned the pages, words like money laundering and drug trafficking jumped out at her. The criminal network was far bigger than she had ever imagined. Tom, why are you showing this to me now? Because, he said, Detective Morrison had a partner who kept his investigation alive, unofficially, for 25 years. Her name is Agent Patricia Collins, and she is a senior investigator at the Federal Bureau of Investigation. She is downstairs with the other agents, Sarah. She has been waiting all this time for someone from your family to help her finish this. Sarah felt herself begin to shake. You mean telling my story today is not just about protecting me from Richard or Victor's sons? It is about finally bringing justice for Detective Morrison and so many other victims, Tom confirmed. Your mother would be incredibly proud of you. Sometimes the most dangerous choice is also the most necessary one. Sarah looked at the old photographs of her mother, seeing her not as a helpless victim, but as a woman who had fought back with everything she had. Tom, I need you to be honest with me, she said, her voice low. Do you believe my mom's car crash was an accident? Tom's expression grew heavy with the weight of 25 years of silence. No, sweetheart, he finally said. I do not. I believe your mother was murdered because she would not stop fighting for you and your brother. The words struck Sarah like a physical blow, but instead of breaking her, they forged her resolve into something as hard as diamond. In that case, it is time to finish what she started. Sarah rose to her feet, placing a protective hand on her stomach. The determined look she gave Tom was a powerful echo of the mother who had raised her. Let us go show the world what happens when you underestimate a Blackstone woman. The conference room at Blackstone Holdings felt more like a courtroom. Cameras were aimed at a single podium, and rows of chairs were filled with reporters and federal agents. As Sarah stood before them, a sense of calm washed over her. "Good morning," she began, her voice clear and strong. "My name is Sarah Wheeler Mitchell. 6 months ago, I believed I knew who I was. I was a former school teacher, married to a prominent attorney, and expecting my first child. Today I am here to talk about the difference between the life you believe you are living and the one that is actually happening around you." She let the words sink in. "I am here to speak about deception, financial control, and how family secrets that are meant to protect can end up destroying lives. It is about the courage it takes to choose truth, even when it is not safe." She looked directly into the main camera, speaking to countless women who might see their own lives in her story. "But mostly, I am here to talk about what happens when you take back your own story." For the next 30 minutes, she laid out the entire narrative: Richard's manipulation, her connection to Marcus, and the web of crime that had secretly shaped her life. As she concluded her statement, she said, "I am not here for your sympathy. I am here as a woman who learned the people she trusted most had betrayed her, and I chose to fight back instead of accepting their lies." The press conference had an immediate and powerful effect. Within 48 hours, Richard's law firm fired him and opened its own investigation. The competency case against Sarah was withdrawn, and Richard's lawyer filed for an uncontested divorce with minimal demands. Maria explained it simply as they looked over the paperwork. "He is trying to minimize the damage. With his tactics now public, he cannot risk having them examined in family court." "What about the threats from Victor's sons?" Sarah asked. "Complete silence," Maria replied. "Agent Collins believes the publicity has made you too risky a target." Just then, Marcus walked in, holding a large folder. "There is more," he said. "The FBI's investigation has found enough evidence to press federal charges against 12 people in Victor's network, including his sons. They think they can finally close cases that have been open for decades, including the murder of Detective Morrison." He opened the folder. "They found financial records proving Victor paid the man who killed him." Tears streamed down Sarah's face. "Mom was murdered because she was trying to protect us," Marcus gently corrected her. "She was murdered because she refused to be controlled, and because she fought back, we now have the evidence to bring them all to justice." "And Victor himself?" "He will die in prison no matter what," Marcus said. "But now his legacy is a string of federal convictions, not a legend about hidden wealth." Sarah thought of her mother, who died trying to give her children a safe future. "I want to do something," she said suddenly. "I want to start a foundation to help women escape manipulative relationships and get legal help." Marcus smiled warmly. "How would you fund it?" "With my inheritance from Victor's confiscated assets, and whatever I get from Richard," she declared. "I want to transform this nightmare into a source of hope for other people. I will call it the Maria Morrison Foundation," she said, "to honor both of them, for truth and for justice." 6 weeks later, Sarah gave birth to a daughter, whom she named Maria Rose Mitchell Blackstone. Marcus was there, crying harder than the baby, as he held his niece in a world that finally felt safe. "She is a Blackstone," Sarah said, tired but triumphant. "She is going to change the world." The foundation's first meeting was held in the same conference room where Sarah had shared her story. 30 women were there, all survivors of manipulation, all working to rebuild their lives on a foundation of truth. "I used to think family was just something you were born into," Sarah told the group, while little Maria slept in her carrier. "But I have learned that real family is something you choose, build, and fight for. The family you choose can be much stronger than the one you were given. The women nodded, seeing their own stories in hers. We are here because we chose truth over comfort and our own voices over silence. Sarah looked at the courageous faces around her. The most important thing I have learned, she continued, is that we do not heal from trauma by ourselves. We heal in a community, together. We find peace not by bearing the past, but by sharing our stories and supporting one another. We must refuse to believe that we deserve anything less than the truth. Later, Sarah stood in Marcus's office, watching her baby daughter, Maria, who already had her grandmother's determined green eyes. "Any regrets?" Marcus asked, standing beside her. Sarah considered the question. About going public? About choosing the truth over the illusion of safety? She shook her head. I only regret that it took me 37 years to realize I had a choice. I regret that my mother died, thinking she had to keep us apart, to keep us safe. I feel sorrow for all the women who are still living the way I was just 6 months ago, Sarah continued. They believe they have to accept being controlled just to feel secure. But the fight itself, I do not regret that at all. It was the first real thing to happen to me in years. Marcus nodded, in understanding. So, what is next? Sarah looked down at her sleeping daughter. Next, we keep fighting. We keep telling the truth, and we build the kind of family my mother always dreamed of. Marcus smiled. That sounds like a legacy. A year later, Sarah stood in the same restaurant where her world had fallen apart. Now it was hosting the first fundraising dinner for the Maria Morrison Foundation. The room was filled with allies and survivors. It feels different in here, Marcus said, joining her by the window. Everything feels different, Sarah replied, adjusting 10-month-old Maria on her hip. The baby girl was curious and fearless, just like her grandmother. The program for the night was simple. Stories from women helped by the foundation and updates on the federal cases that followed Sarah's testimony. The most important part of the evening came when FBI agent Patricia Collins approached her. Miss Mitchell, I want to thank you, the agent said, her voice filled with emotion after a 25-year investigation. Because you spoke up, we finally closed Detective Morrison's murder case. His family waited decades for this. So it was Victor? Sarah asked. We can't prove he gave the direct order, but we convicted the men who did it and traced the money back to his organization. Your mother was right to be afraid. She was a brave woman fighting an unimaginable evil all by herself. Agent Collins continued, the difference is you were not alone. You had a brother with resources, and you live in a time when people are more willing to listen. Sarah thought about how easily her story could have ended in tragedy. Have we really stopped them? She asked. We have disrupted them. 3 of Victor's sons are in federal prison, and the rest of their crew have been arrested or have fled. But crime is like a weed. The important thing is, we sent a message that this kind of cruelty will be prosecuted. And Richard? Sarah asked. He is serving 18 months in a minimum security prison for fraud. He will lose his license and his money, but he will get out. What he does, then, is not your problem anymore. Later, Sarah spoke with other women whose stories echoed her own. A psychologist, Dr. Rebecca Martinez, remarked, "It is amazing how these abusers follow the same script. They start with intense affection, then slowly tear down your confidence and cut you off from everyone." Jennifer Chen, a lawyer, agreed. It is like they are all reading from the same playbook, Sarah added quietly. They are. Dr. Martinez leaned in, explaining why Sarah's story hit home for so many. Richard's tactics work because they prey on our basic need for love and security. The only defense is knowing the signs and having support. Sarah looked at the women in the room, all survivors, rebuilding their lives. I have been thinking, she began, about the difference between healing and justice. I used to believe getting justice would automatically heal me, but I have learned they are separate journeys. Justice was seeing Richard prosecuted for his crimes. Healing, she continued, happened when I started telling my own story and refused to let others define my worth. Dr. Martinez nodded. Healing is internal, something you control. Justice is external, depending on systems and other people. Sarah agreed, adding that many survivors get stuck, waiting for a justice that may never come, which only gives their abusers more power. Her gaze fell on Marcus across the room. She realized family is not about blood, but about the people who consistently show up, who champion your growth instead of trying to control it. As the evening ended, Sarah stood on the exact spot where Richard had struck her 13 months before. The memory was there, but the sting was gone. Thinking about that night? Marcus asked quietly, holding a sleeping Maria. I am thinking about how different everything is, Sarah replied. Then, I felt trapped and powerless. Tonight, I feel like I am right where I belong. Marcus asked what advice she would give her former self. I would tell her the slap was not the worst part. The years of accepting that I was less than equal was the worst part. And the best part? The slap finally made me angry enough to demand better. Sarah took her daughter from Marcus, amazed by the love she felt. What do you want for her? He asked. I want her to know her own value, Sarah said. I want her to understand that real love makes you feel bigger, not smaller. And I want her to know she always has a choice, even when it is hard. She added, if she ever faces what I did, I want her to remember her mother chose courage, and her family's legacy is to fight back against those who use love as a weapon. Sometimes, the worst thing that happens to you opens the door to the very best. As they were leaving, their waiter approached, the same young man from that awful night. Miss Mitchell, he said with a warm smile, I followed your story. Watching your courage that night inspired me to finally leave an abusive relationship of my own. Tears welled in Sarah's eyes. I am so glad you are safe. He beamed. I am, and I am applying to law school to help others, just like your foundation helped me. Marcus shook his head in wonder. You see, your story has created ripples you will never even know about. Looking at her daughter, Sarah said softly, that is the thing about truth. Once you tell it, it takes on a life of its own. Marcus asked if she had any regrets. She thought of the quiet, simple life she could have had if she had just taken Richard's deal and disappeared. No regrets, she said firmly. Only gratitude. As they walked into the cool spring air, she felt a sense of peace. She had lost a false marriage, but gained a true family. She had traded the illusion of security for the reality of her own strength. The rain had stopped, leaving the city sparkling. Sarah held her daughter close, walking toward a new life with her brother at her side. Behind them, the restaurant buzzed with new stories, its patrons unaware that for one woman, this place had been transformed from a site of pain into the birthplace of her purpose. Sarah had come full circle, but her world was wider now, stronger, and built on a foundation of truth that could weather any storm. Sarah's journey reminds us that real strength isn't about never falling. It's about choosing to rise when everyone expects you to stay down. If this story moved you, if it made you think about your own relationships or gave you hope, please hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear this message. Drop a comment below. I'd love to know. What moment in Sarah's story resonated with you the most? And if you haven't already, subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss stories like this one. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to bring you meaningful lessons and inspiration. Thank you for being here.